Hi there, my name is Chelsea Bardot-Lewis and I'm coming to you from Waterbury. As a senior philanthropic advisor on the Grants and Community Investments team, part of my role is to manage our mission investments program. We were the first community foundation in the country to direct a percentage across our pooled assets for place-based investments. When you establish a fund at the VCF, your fund owns a piece of this Vermont investment pool. These investments create resilient Vermont communities and businesses. For example, in 2018, we made an equity investment in High Mowing Seeds of Wolcott. Your fund owns a piece of the largest organic-only seed company in the country. We knew that this was an investment that could be considered risky, but their vision for community impact aligned with ours. In 2019, we made a follow-on investment, giving them additional cash flow for a complete overhaul of their IT systems and expansion of their sales team, and supporting them through some changes in their management structure. When COVID hit, new demand for seeds surged as people looked to their own backyards to feed their families, and High Mowing Seeds sales more than doubled during what is already their busiest time of the year. They would not have been able to handle this astounding increase in demand were it not for the upgraded IT system and new staff. Now deemed essential workers, High Mowing Seeds staff were able to stay employed through the pandemic. And in a continued show of their commitment to community, this year High Mowing Seeds has donated over 150,000 seed packets to support food insecure Vermonters. Our investment helped High Mowing Seeds become a more resilient business so the company could continue to support its employees and keep civic infrastructure running. Working together, we are creating a more resilient Vermont.
Good afternoon. I'm Sarah Waring from the Grants and Investments team. Projects like the investment in High Mowing Organic Seeds wouldn't be possible without on-the-ground knowledge of Vermont communities. Within our team, we focus on community engagement as a strategy to inform both our strategic grant making and our Vermont investing. Our strategies are both data-driven and informed by that local knowledge and insight. As a reminder, we've been working in the opportunity gap arena, and our 4 areas of focus are college and career training, early care and learning, support for youth and families, and community and economic vitality. In the next few minutes, I plan to take you through what we know about working within the opportunity gap framework and how that's helped us pivot to response and recovery during the COVID pandemic. It's our job to help inspire philanthropy, and one of the metrics that we shared with you from 2019 was how much aligned grant making was made towards the 4 opportunity gap focus areas. Of the nearly $26 million in total in grant making, we saw 17 million of that focused on some aspect of opportunity gap work. Some of these grants were leadership level, such as the McClure Foundation's work on pathways to college and career training, or the Curtis Fund's granting for scholarships through the Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, or High Meadows Fund's work on vital and resilient communities and environments. What's important about this metric is that it illustrates the impact that we have when we are all working together towards a specific vision for Vermont. But beyond the impact of the dollars, we also measure our own knowledge creation and the lessons that we learn. First, we know the value of place-based grant making. When we focus time and resources to learn about a region or a community, the impact is longer lasting and it's better tailored to the need. Second, we know that we can rely on statewide partners to help us understand how those local projects change Vermont as a whole. Statewide partners help us to find models and to give us confidence that the foundation is supporting the kinds of work that close the opportunity gap and that benefit Vermonters. Third, we know that small grants often enhance and grow connectivity and cross-difference interaction within communities. We've seen the growth of social capital, trust in place and community, as well as local grassroots action when small grants are done well. And finally, when fundholders are actively engaged in solutions, we uncover important ways to make a difference in their communities. We've been so lucky in the work we've been able to do with fundholders and partners, and Stacy and Elizabeth shared some of this earlier in the meeting. But then the world changed this year, and community engagement became a lot harder to do. The response from our team and from the entire foundation makes us all really proud. When we began the COVID-19 Response Fund, we imagined that we'd look to raise dollars both for basic and urgent needs, as well as for long-term recovery, social and economic. We were anticipating a number of waves of vulnerability, not simply the vulnerable populations related to the virus, or the need to be at home with children during this time, but also a wave of closures, a wave of mergers, a wave of institutional instability, and even supply chain instability. Using our existing networks and community connectedness, as well as best practices from across the country, we did the following things. We removed restrictions on our grants already at work in community because nothing was business as usual. We encouraged our donor-advised fund holders to do the same. We focused on large areas of need, like food insecurity across the state, but we made specific and hyper-local grants, such as to every single food pantry and food shelf in the Vermont Food Bank's network. We proactively sought out community-based organizations who were extending or expanding their services to meet these needs. And we partnered with many other fund holders, both to share knowledge and to align grant making where possible, standing up projects like the Arts Recovery Effort with the Vermont Arts Council. So the COVID-19 fund was designed at the outset with a 50-50 split, half of the grant making for basic and urgent needs like food and shelter and safety, and half for thinking about a longer term set of systems that would move Vermont to a more resilient and transformative place, a social and economic recovery. In these next two slides, you'll see the month-by-month overview of our first phase, basic and urgent needs. I want you to read this if you can, but I'm also going to give you a couple examples of how this played out on the ground. My first example under the youth support is a partnership with the Vermont Principals Association. This partner set up a granting program for schools to support mental health and access to learning, focusing on those schools with the highest free and reduced lunch metrics. With this program, we were also able to leverage a $50,000 gift from a national funder to support this work. My second example is a partnership with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture and the Vermont Food Bank, where the COVID fund supported the processing of fluid milk from Vermont farmers that would otherwise have been dumped. Instead, it went into the emergency food supply chain, feeding Vermonters in all corners of the state. A final example, as you read what we were doing in June and July. We started out a grant with the Shift Meals effort, which connected the Skinny Pancake restaurants to making meals for the food insecure, which then led to their work with the food bank and providing meals in a contracted way for a larger geographic region. This then became a statewide model. And just recently, $5 million of CARES Act funding is going to Southeastern Vermont Community Action for the Everybody Eats program. And now there are community hubs across Vermont who will engage restaurants, keep people employed, buy local products from farmers and producers, and feed food insecure people. This has even recently been on national news. For a sense of scale, in 2019, we did about 230 individual grants to nonprofits. Since March, we've probably reached more like 500 or 600 individual nonprofits. Now, you'll notice that we paused in August on our basic needs grants. This is not because there weren't Vermonters in need or nonprofits working hard to support them and to pivot to provide vital services for their communities. Instead, we were watching the CARES Act funding beginning to be rolled out by the state of Vermont and thinking about philanthropy as a place of leverage and a place to help fill gaps. And we've spent the month of August beginning our recovery phase as well. When we work on recovery, here's what we're aiming to do. We want to anticipate growth, leverage, and sustainability through public and private investment and the unique role of philanthropy. We want to address deep demographic challenges faced by Vermont communities, and we want to think out about what will change Vermont in the next 20 to 30 years for strong, resilient, and equitable communities. So, what does this look like in practice? We have 5 systems level initiatives that we will be tackling over the course of the rest of this year. The first is rural entrepreneurship. We know that small business and entrepreneurship are metrics for the economic strength and recovery in rural areas after recessions. We're looking at the overlay of entrepreneurship, small business support, vibrant downtowns, and outdoor recreation. The next is food system resilience. We know that our local food system pivoted in this time of crisis, bringing together a supply chain to feed Vermonters first. We want this supply chain to be there in the future, which requires a strong local food economy, seizing the moment now to capture the consumers and the markets that will make farm viability a reality. So we want to strengthen these food systems by investing in the connections between local food, food insecurity, food access, and farm viability. Rural connectivity. Now more than ever, we know that digital access will either allow you to join your community and meet your needs and those of your family, or lack of access will leave you behind. Establishing equitable internet access for communities by exploring and expanding existing models, but particularly understanding where and how the communications unification district structure can leverage access for all communities within those regions in Vermont is important. The next is learning in transition. Using the existing expertise of our partners in the field, particularly some of our supporting organizations, this strategy seeks to deepen our work around developing the cradle to career infrastructure. Specifically, we're identifying best career pathways with the McClure Foundation, supporting service and skill building for youth and adults, and moving in tandem with Let's Grow Kids as they identify the most critical leverage points for early care, all of which increase equity and social mobility. And finally, welcoming equitable and anti-racist communities. Our goal here is to advance a vision for Vermont communities that embraces diversity, growth, and the creation of community ties that connect people to each other and to the place that they call home, particularly building on the capacity for Vermont to deepen our cultural awareness and address systemic racism. We know that Vermont has work to do. We're seeing this play out in towns and communities across Vermont right now, from Vergennes to Burlington to Bennington to St. Albans. And it's local and it's real. But we are also following the state level work with the Social Equity Caucus and Task Force, and we hope to set the stage for a more inclusive Vermont by building capacity to engage and address racial equity, diversity, social justice, and systemic racism. Finally, we want to thank you all for joining us in this work and for making the response possible. We couldn't do this without you or without the grantee partners on the ground.